Hello, friends. There are shadows that creep in when the world falls silent. Not the shadows of dusk, but those within, the ones that whisper you are alone. In the vast tapestry of human experience, loneliness is a thread that binds us all. It is the chill that settles in after a long day, the ache that gnaws when the phone stays quiet, the profound emptiness that echoes in the largest rooms. And in those moments, the most desperate question whispers back. Is anyone truly there? Is God truly there? Or is it just us suspended in the cosmic silence? Today, we journey into the heart of those very questions. We confront the abyss of solitude and uncover three undeniable proofs that even in your loneliest nights, when the world abandons you and hope seems a distant star, a divine presence stands. These are stories carved from the very fabric of existence, narratives that will challenge your perception of abandonment, reveal the invisible hand, and illuminate the quiet whisper of the eternal. Prepare to see the darkness not as an end, but as a canvas upon which the divine draws its most intimate masterpieces. Prepare to understand that your solitude is not a void, but a sacred space where the divine waits to meet you. Are you ready to hear then? Let us begin. Our first proof emerges from the dusty sun-baked plains of ancient Canaan, a land echoing with the bleating of sheep and the harsh cries of family strife. Imagine a young man, Joseph, 17 years old, vibrant, dreaming vivid dreams of sheaves, bowing to his, of stars and sun bending to his will. A beloved son, yes, but also one marked by a cruel distinction, fey, the coat of many colors, a symbol of favoritism that festered like a poison in the hearts of his brothers. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was a simmering cauldron of envy, a resentment so potent it would burst forth in an act of chilling betrayal. Can you feel the tension in the air, the unspoken animosity building with every sunrise? The brothers, hardened by labor and overshadowed by their younger kin, saw not a brother, but a rival, a dreamer whose very existence mocked their toil. One fateful day, far from the watchful eyes of their father, a conspiracy took root. They saw him approaching, his vibrant coat a beacon in the desolate landscape, and their hatred ignited. The plan: eliminate him not with a dark, echoing void, a sudden plunge from the warmth of the sun into the suffocating chill of earth. Imagine Joseph, tumbling, scraping, landing in the damp, insect-ridden darkness, the rough walls pressing in, the sudden absolute silence from above, broken only by the distant, mocking voices of his own kin, the frantic realization that the very hands that should have... This was not merely physical isolation. This was the brutal severing of every familial bond, the shattering of trust, the ultimate abandonment. In that pit, Joseph was utterly, terrifyingly alone. No one to hear his cries, no one to comfort his fear. His dreams, once so vivid, now seemed a cruel mockery. Where was God in that moment? In that suffocating hole with Ishmaelite traders, their camels laden, their eyes sharp with commerce. A desperate brother, Reuben, intervening, suggesting sale over murder. And so Joseph was pulled from one horror, only to be thrown into another. Slavery, sold for 20 pieces of silver, a price of a slave. The young dreamer, once pampered, now chained, marched across the burning sand, a place of towering monuments and alien gods, a place where his God, the God of his fathers, seemed distant, forgotten. This journey, a forced march into an unknown future, was a prolonged agony of loneliness. Every step away from Canaan, every grain of sand kicked up by the sandals of his captors, deepened the chasm between his past and his terrifying present. He was an object. He was sold into the house of Potiphar, a high-ranking officer in Pharaoh's court. A stroke of fortune in misfortune, perhaps. Joseph, with his innate intelligence and divine favor, quickly rose in Potiphar's household. He managed everything, ran the entire estate. He found purpose in his captivity, a semblance of normalcy. But peace is often fleeting when envy and malice lurk nearby. Joseph, upholding his integrity, resisted. He knew the cost of compromise, and then the ultimate injustice, a false accusation, her words sharp as knives, twisting truth into a venomous lie. Potiphar, trusting his wife over his faithful servant, cast Joseph into the king's prison. Not just any prison, but one where the king's own prisoners were kept, a place of deep. The pit of betrayal had been a terrifying prologue. Potiphar's house, a fleeting reprieve. But the prison, that was the crucible. Imagine the stone walls, damp and cold, echoing with the moans of the condemned, the clanking of chains, the stench of unwashed bodies, the gnawing hunger, and Joseph again, a prisoner, unjustly accused, utterly alone. His dreams now, years stretched into an eternity. He met fellow prisoners, the king's cupbearer and baker. He interpreted their dreams with divine insight, giving them hope. The cupbearer promised to remember him upon his release. A flicker of light in the darkness, but hope too can be a cruel mistress. 2 long years passed. The cupbearer, restored to his position, forgot Joseph in time to be abandoned by family, falsely accused by a master, and then utterly forgotten by the one man who could have spoken a word for him. This was the pinnacle of human loneliness. Where was God in that prison cell? In the monotony of the days, the terror of the nights, was his presence merely a distant memory, a forgotten promise? Here lies the core of our first proof. The mystery of Joseph's profound solitude. How could a God of love? The answer is not in a sudden, dramatic rescue, but in a quiet, persistent presence that reshapes the very essence of despair. God was not absent. He was orchestrating, he was preparing, he was refining. The prison for Joseph was not a dead end, but a dark tunnel leading to a grander purpose. The skills he learned in managing Potiphar's house, the wisdom gained from interpreting dreams, the patience when Pharaoh himself was troubled by dreams no one could interpret. The forgotten cupbearer suddenly remembered. The king's summons. Imagine Joseph, pulled from the dungeon, hastily shaved, clothed in fresh garments, standing before the most powerful ruler on earth. No fear, no resentment. Only a quiet confidence in the God who had never truly left him. He didn't just interpret Pharaoh's dreams of lean cows and thin ears of grain. He provided a solution, a plan to save Egypt and the surrounding world from a devastating famine. This was not Joseph's cleverness alone. This was divine wisdom flowing through a man who had been tempered in the fires of isolation. Pharaoh, recognizing the Spirit of God in Joseph, elevated him instantly from prisoner to viceroy. The speed of it was breathtaking, the reversal absolute. And what did Joseph do with his power? He administered the land with wisdom and foresight, stockpiling grain during years of abundance, then distributing it during the famine. He saved lives, countless lives, including those of the very brothers who had cast him into the pit. When they arrived, desperate for food, bowing before him unknowingly, the scene charged with raw emotion, the brothers trembling, fearing retribution, and Joseph, now mighty, revealing his true identity. "I am Joseph, your brother." Can you feel the shock, the terror, the dawning realization? But Joseph's words, forged in the crucible of his loneliness, were not of vengeance, but of profound forgiveness and divine understanding. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." The first undeniable proof. God's presence in your loneliest nights is often an invisible hand, weaving seemingly random threads of suffering and injustice into a masterpiece of purpose. It's a providential presence, not always preventing the pain, but transforming it. Joseph's solitude wasn't a punishment, it was a classroom. His abandonment wasn't an oversight, it was a pathway to an improbable God was there, not always in miraculous intervention, but in the quiet strengthening of his spirit, in the opening of doors he could never have conceived, in the turning of betrayal into salvation. When you feel abandoned, when you question the why of your suffering, remember Joseph. Remember that even in the deepest pit, a divine narrative is unfolding, preparing you for a purpose far grander than your present pain. Your lonely nights might just be God's strategic silence, a time for deep work, a space where he is crafting a strength within you, a resilience that will one day save not just yourself, but perhaps even those who have wounded you. This understanding changes everything, doesn't it? It transforms the bitter taste of isolation into the hopeful anticipation of divine intention. And if this perspective has already stirred something within you, if it is started to reach now, let's move to our second undeniable proof. Our journey takes us from the bustling markets of ancient Egypt to the windswept slopes of Mount Carmel, a place where fire fell from heaven and a nation cried out for the true God. The prophet Elijah, a man of raw power and unyielding conviction, he stood alone against the 450 prophets of Baal, daring them to call down fire from their idol. Nothing then Elijah drenched his altar, stood, and with a simple, potent prayer commanded the heavens. Fire erupted. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench. A nation fell to its knees, proclaiming, "The Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God." This was the pinnacle of prophetic triumph, a moment of unparalleled divine validation, but the heights of triumph can often precede the depths of despair. News of Carmel reached Queen Jezebel, a woman of unbridled wickedness, a worshipper of Baal and a murderer of prophets. Her fury was absolute. She sent a message to Elijah, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Imagine Elijah, the man who had just confronted an entire nation and its false gods, the man who had seen fire fall from heaven. What would he do? Stand his ground, confront the queen? Number he fled, not just a hasty retreat, but a desperate panic flight for his life. He ran for a day's journey into the wilderness, abandoning his servant, seeking the deepest solitude, and there, beneath a broom tree, "It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers." This was not just physical fatigue, this was a profound spiritual and psychological breakdown. The man who had faced down an army of false prophets was now undone by the threat of a single woman. He was utterly alone in the vast, desolate wilderness, consumed by fear, despair, and a crushing sense of failure. He believed he was the last prophet of God, that his mission had failed, that he was utterly, devastatingly alone in his faithfulness. Where was God now after such a spectacular display on Carmel, after such a mighty vindication? Had God abandoned his prophet to the clutches of despair and the barrenness of the wilderness? This is the profound mystery of Elijah's loneliness. The one who had walked with God in power now sought God's presence in your loneliest nights is often a whispering voice, a gentle, persistent comfort in the midst of overwhelming desolation. Elijah awoke to a touch, not a thunderbolt, not a fiery chariot, but a gentle touch, an angel. And there, beside him, freshly baked bread and a jar of water, simple provision, not a grand miracle of deliverance, but a quiet act of sustenance. The angel returned, urging him, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." And with the strength from that divinely provided meal, Elijah journeyed for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God, the very place where Moses had met the Almighty in the burning bush. Imagine the long, arduous trek, the silence, the isolation, the relentless desert wind. Finally he reached a cave, a dark sanctuary, echoing with his own desperate thoughts. And there, the voice of the Lord came to him, not in a grand declaration, but in a question, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" A simple yet profound question that cut to the core of his despair. Elijah poured out his heart, repeating his litany of woes, his perceived failure, "For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." He felt completely, utterly alone in his devotion. Then came the divine command, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." And the Lord passed by first, a mighty wind tearing mountains apart, then a fire consuming everything in its path. But the Lord was not in the fire, each phenomenon, grander than the last, a display of raw, overwhelming power. Elijah must have expected God to appear in one of these magnificent, terrifying displays, mirroring the fire of Carmel. He was likely braced for a divine roar, a cosmic declaration. But then, after the fire, came a sound, and when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, for he knew, instinctively, that the Lord was in that whisper. The God of power, the God of fire, chose to reveal himself not in the cataclysm, but in the intimate, almost inaudible murmur. It was in that whisper that God recommissioned him, gave him new assignments, and perhaps most importantly, revealed a truth that shattered his illusion of solitude. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Elijah was not alone. There were thousands, hidden faithful. God knew them, and God was with them. God's presence in your loneliest nights is often a whispering voice, a gentle comfort that transcends the spectacular, reaching into the depths of your despair, reminding you of his intimate care and that you are never truly abandoned. It is a presence that brings sustenance when you are starving, rest when you are weary, and a quiet, profound reassurance that even when you feel like the last one standing, you are part of a greater. Elijah's despair was met not with judgment but with gentle provision, profound presence in silence, and a renewed purpose. His loneliness was a path to a deeper intimacy with God, where the divine spoke not in thunder, but in a whisper that healed his broken spirit and revitalized his mission. When your soul is weary, when your courage fails, and you feel utterly spent and alone, remember that God often speaks not in the storm, but in the stillness after it. In the quiet assurance that he sees you, he hears you, and he is there, closer than your very breath. Now we come to our third and final proof. It is perhaps the most profound, for it speaks to the very heart of human suffering and divine solidarity. Our setting is the Garden of Gethsemane, on a night steeped in an ancient silence, broken only by the Son of God, fully divine, yes, but also fully human. He had just shared his last meal with his disciples, a Passover transformed into a poignant foreshadowing of his sacrifice. He spoke of betrayal, of his impending death, of a new covenant sealed in his blood. The atmosphere was thick with foreboding. He knew what was coming. He led his disciples to Gethsemane, a place of quiet retreat. He took Peter, James, and John, his inner circle, deeper into the garden, instructing them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here, and watch with me." And then he went a little farther, separating himself even from his closest friends to pray. This was not a casual prayer. This was an agony. He fell on his face, crying out, "My Father, if it be possible, let..." The metaphor for the unimaginable suffering, the bearing of the world's sin, the separation from the Father, the weight of it was so immense that his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground. Hematidrosis, a rare medical condition caused by extreme distress. He was facing the ultimate loneliness, the weight of humanity's sin, the cosmic horror of becoming sin itself, the impending abandonment by not once but 3 times. "Could you not watch with me 1 hour?" he implored. Their exhaustion, their human weakness, their inability to comprehend the magnitude of his agony, left him profoundly alone in his greatest hour of need. The disciples, those who had walked with him, seen his miracles, heard his teachings, who had pledged their loyalty just hours before they failed him. They slept. This was a loneliness born of incomprehension, of human frailty, of the inability of even the most devoted friends to truly share in the burden of immense suffering. He was alone with his impending fate, alone with the Father's will, alone with the unspeakable weight of a world's transgression. The mystery here is profound. If even the Son of God, in his perfect communion with the Father, could experience such profound solitude, if Jesus, the very embodiment of divine presence, felt the crushing burden of human isolation, how do we find God in our moments of utter abandonment? This is where our third proof shines with a heartbreaking, yet ultimately triumphant light. God's presence in your loneliest nights is an unbreakable bond, a sustaining power that allows you to face even the most terrifying abandonment without being consumed. Though his disciples slept, though the forces of darkness gathered, Jesus was not truly alone. He wrestled in prayer. Yes, but his cries were directed to his Father. The very intimacy of his address, "Abba, Father," reveals a connection that no human failure could sever. The presence was not an external intervention to remove the cup, but an internal strengthening to drink it. And the scripture tells us that not a rescue but sustenance for the journey through the darkness. The ultimate test of this bond came moments later. Judas, the betrayer, arrived with a band of armed men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees. The kiss, a symbol of affection, twisted into an act of ultimate treachery. The very act meant to identify him, sealing his fate, And again, Jesus was alone, singled out, betrayed by one of his, arrested, dragged before false accusations, subjected to brutal mockery and torture, and ultimately nailed to a cross. On that cross, he uttered the most desolate cry in human history. My God, why have you forsaken me?" This was the culmination of his loneliness, the moment when the Son, for a brief agonizing instant, experienced the ultimate separation from the Father as he bore the sin of the world. His bond with the Father was not broken, but stretched to its absolute limit for the sake of humanity. This is the third most profound proof. In your loneliest nights, when friends fail, when betrayal strikes, when hope seems to vanish, and you feel utterly forsaken, remember Gethsemane. Remember the cross. God's presence is not always a joyous intervention that lifts you out of the... Sometimes, it is the silent, sustaining power that allows you to walk faith through the suffering, knowing that the ultimate bond, the unbreakable connection with the divine, holds you. Jesus, in his profound human loneliness, showed us that the Father was there, not to prevent the agony, but to empower him through it. His Gethsemane was a testament to the fact that even in the absolute depths of solitude, the divine presence is... Your loneliness, then, is not a void to be feared, but a space where you can experience the profound solidarity of a God who understands and has himself known the agony of isolation. He walks with you, not just by your side, but within your very being, strengthening you for whatever cup you must drink. So what do these three proofs tell us about God's presence in your loneliest nights? They reveal a multifaceted yet consistent truth. Your deepest pain can be God's strategic preparation for your greatest purpose. Second, that God's presence is comforting, a whispering voice that meets you in your deepest despair, offering solace and reassurance when you feel completely alone and exhausted, just as Elijah found in the wilderness. Your quietest moments of despair are often the very space where God chooses to speak his most... And third, that God's presence is an unbreakable bond, a sustaining power that allows you to face even the ultimate abandonment and suffering without being utterly destroyed, mirroring Jesus' agony in Gethsemane. Your moments of deepest solitude are an invitation to experience an unyielding connection with the divine that transcends all human failure and betrayal. The next time the shadows creep in, the next time the whisper of "you are alone" threatens to consume you, remember these narratives. Remember Joseph in his pit, Elijah beneath his broom tree, and Jesus in his garden of agony. Their stories are not just ancient tales, they are living testimonies, resounding across millennia, that no night is truly empty, no solitude is ever... The divine presence is not a fleeting guest. It is the very fabric of reality, a constant companion waiting for you to perceive it in the quiet, in the pain, and in the profound stillness. You are seen, you are heard, you are held. In your loneliest nights, God is not merely present, he is intensely, intimately, purposefully with you. All right, that is it for today's video. If you enjoyed it,